Jewish oral Torah tells the story of Rabbi Eleazar ben Horkanus, a particularly brilliant but obstinate member of the Sanhedrin, which is a democratic body of rabbis that makes determinations on religious law. There are no more prophets running around, so these rabbis are tasked with adapting the laws of the written Torah to modern issues, using hermeneutics to interpret the Word of God. Rabbi Eleazar, a genius though he was, had trouble wrapping his mind around this interpretation thing, particularly when it came to the majority rules nature of the Sanhedrin. The story goes that a problem is brought before the Sanhedrin, something concerning a new kind of oven. All the rabbis determine that the oven can become ritually impure, with only Rabbi Eleazar arguing the opposite. The Sanhedrin is a democratic body, majority rules, and Rabbi Eleazar should accept their decision, regardless of his own opinion. But he can't. He knows he's right. In frustration, he cries out, "If it's as I say, this carob tree will prove it." Miraculously, the tree springs out of the earth and begins to run on its roots far away. But the other rabbis roll their eyes. They're like, how exactly does that prove your point? Rabbi Eleazar, blind with righteous anger, yells again, "If it is as I say, this stream will prove it." The rabbis watch as the currents of the stream cease, and begin to flow backwards. It's miraculous. But, the other rabbis explain, one can't cite the movements of a stream as proof in matters of religious law. Come on, man. This is getting embarrassing. Rabbi Eleazar is straight up having a panic attack by this point. "If it's as I say, the walls of the study hall will prove it." Immediately, the walls of the room crack. The seams between the rock tear apart from each other, and it begins to tumble down. But another rabbi scolds the walls of the study hall. "How dare you interfere in a scholarly debate? Stay out of this." Rabbi Eleazar has never heard the definition of insanity. He cries out one last time, "If it is as I say, heaven will prove it." A voice like thunder racks the crumbling walls of the study hall and bears down on the other rabbis. In all matters of religious law, the truth is always in accordance with Rabbi Eleazar's opinion. There. It's entirely unambiguous now. You can't cite a carob tree in matters of religious law, but surely you can cite the voice of heaven. And yet, Rabbi Joshua ben Hanania responds, "The Torah is not in heaven." The significance of this sentence is not lost on Rabbi Eleazar. It's from the Torah. It is not in heaven that you should say, "Who will go up to heaven for us, and get it for us, that we may hear it and observe it?" Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, "Who will cross to the other side of the sea for us, and get it for us, that we may hear it and observe it?" No, the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart for you to observe. Rabbi Joshua reminds Rabbi Eleazar that the Torah was given to them so that they could find truth themselves and act accordingly, not so that they could rely on God to tell them exactly what to think and how to behave. He uses the words of God to appropriately take issue with God's commands, effectively spoken through Rabbi Eleazar. Upon hearing Rabbi Joshua's response, God smiles and says, "My children have triumphed over me." It may have once been the case that miracles and prophets could offer up ultimate truths to humanity, that truth didn't require struggle and doubt. But that time has passed, and truth is a bit more complicated. It's difficult to do good without doing bad, and just as often, overwhelmingly bad things lead to some unmistakable bit of good that makes the bad thing worthwhile. The struggle with truth doesn't make you stupid. We aren't stupider now that reality needs to be inspected with greater care. It is, in my opinion, a mark of our maturity as a species that good and bad and truth and falsehood are trickier to pinpoint.
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god! What is that?
Magic! What the hell is it, and why can't I shut up about it? Is it a reified form of psychic processes that destabilizes our capitalistic notions of individuality? Or is it a rigidly ordered mine of unparalleled energy that we can exploit to systematically colonize every inch and facet of our lived reality? No, it's the first one. I spent much of last year thinking about the politics of magic. This started with an exploration of The Dragon Prince, which I discovered at the beginning of 2024. I immediately devoured 5 seasons of the show and began making videos about it just a month later. I simply couldn't stop myself. I seemed to never run out of things to say about this show that I felt offered up genuine social critiques through its themes in a way that I'd never seen a child-centric show do. And then, at the end of the year, we got our second and final season of Arcane. I was a casual fan of season 1 and decided I'd contribute a review of the season when it came out. That review is on Animation for Adults if you're interested. In keeping with the first season, I was more or less content with the second half of the show, with some notable exceptions, and yet there was one particular aspect of the show that kept me returning to the topic over and over again. Both of these shows use magic as a way of shaking up social hierarchies. They each create a ton of avenues for exploring how social hierarchies react when their underclasses achieve the means to fight back. But neither manages to do this. So that's why we're here today. We're about to talk about these two finales and the shows that preceded them, as well as the theme of social unrest. But before that, I'd like to offer a preamble that some viewers might find helpful. And I do mean offer. You can take it or leave it. It's right over here, in its own separate video for your convenience. We're about to talk a lot about themes, and indeed much of my channel homes in on the themes of story in a way that some people find a little too abstract for their liking. So, in this little guy over here, I explain exactly why I care so much about themes and why we can't have the in-depth discussions that I would like to have without them. If that context would help you digest this video, feel free to click the little guy. Otherwise, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Both The Dragon Prince and Arcane wrapped up their final seasons, hopefully, within a month of each other. And both left me with the frustration of unhad conversations. I was particularly upset with the ending of The Dragon Prince. I was once told that some stories raise thematic questions it already knows the answers to, and others ask questions that will be explored throughout the course of the story. Is the story willing to open its mind to the audience, challenge itself, challenge the truths it takes for granted in a public setting where they can be scrutinized? Sometimes you see the struggle with truth, and sometimes it feels distinctly painted over. It is perhaps this distinction that defines a mature story from an immature one. Arcane had no interest in dissecting its own beliefs. It was going to be against messing with the natural order no matter what. And it telegraphed that right from the start. Even when the natural order includes suffering and subjugation, even when unstable variables external to the natural world can tangibly make things better, that which is external should never interfere with the world as it is. We're told so throughout the first season. Heimerdinger is treated as a Cassandra whose grim prophecies are not heeded. Victor is more of an Icarus, with his hubris leading to his downfall. Mel's politicking toward the reckless pursuit of technological progress is always framed as sinister, even when we sympathize with her. Just about every element of Season 1 is telling you that pursuing magic is wrong, rather than directing the audience to come to that conclusion themselves. Howdy fellas, I made a few mistakes, so I'm coming back in to fix them. Rather than directing the audience to come to that conclusion themselves, yes. But also, rather than allowing their starting position to be meaningfully challenged. The show offers an argument with two sides, to hextech or not to hextech, and by the end, its starting position is completely unaltered. Might as well have not challenged the premise in the first place. The drive toward progress is innately destructive. The Arcane is Pandora's box. Don't open it. It is the second season's ineptitude in actually expressing why it's asserting that claim that makes it so crunchy to talk about for me. It doesn't feel curious about its own beliefs, it feels defensive of them. Like, they want to make their point so badly, but they can't contend with the implications of their own text when it starts to contradict them, which is why they need to introduce multiple realities to prove their point. Magic was bad the whole time! Look at these other realities that we just made up, guys! The show believes in its thesis too strongly to ever allow an antithesis to meaningfully alter its starting position. This rigid thesis causes characters to get continuously derailed from exploring the nature of the arcane more fully. We learn a bit about wild runes, that magic is its own ambiguously conscious substance that doesn't like being controlled by human hands. To me, this sounds like an eminently workable problem. You can create an entire field of study around learning how to work with the arcane, rather than bending it to your will. It's almost comically easy to convince Jace and Victor that Hextech is suddenly completely invalid. Victor particularly has a very strange switch in motives in Season 1. As the requisite speaker of on-the-nose observations, he says that, In pursuit of great, we fail to do good. This is an insane thing to say after killing someone by accident. His pursuit of the great didn't lead to Sky's death. A freak accident did. He was almost annoyingly responsible and conscientious with his actions leading up to her death. He didn't test his research on other subjects, he took the experimental medicine by himself, and he waited for everyone to leave the office. If Victor's really pursuing great to the exclusion of doing good, you kinda just have to go for it at some point. Show him experimenting on an animal like Singed, or have him actually experimenting on Sky. You can even show him manipulating her feelings for him, because it's all for the greater good. Do something to prove to me that Victor has intentionally done something for which he needs to redeem himself. Prove to me that his pursuit cannot result in good. But you aren't supposed to think that deeply about it, because if you do, you'll realize that the Arcane itself is no more the problem than gas-powered engines are in our world. You can kill someone with a car, you can hurt the ecosystem, you can bring the whole world to the edge of climate catastrophe, but it's not the car that's the problem. The car can be used responsibly or irresponsibly, for good or for bad. The problem is always you, the people who act recklessly and callously, and the random happenings of chance that lead to suffering. It takes a level of maturity to accept that the world sometimes gets a little bit better, even as it gets more dangerous. And this show is not particularly mature. Arcane never wanted to seriously examine what magic means in a world with such a deep class disparity. What defines hubris and why is it bad? When is the relief of suffering worth the cost of long-term complications of progress? If magic doesn't equalize a society, what does? Apparently, the answer is heavenly robots. If the poor people would just agree to throw their bodies into danger while the elite look at maps and engage in very mannered dueling, equality could be achieved. Vi has to carry the dead in her arms while dodging bullets, while Mel gets to hold her dying mother, and none of these hardened zealots are going to interfere, because this is the special battle for special people born into wealth and power. Well, everyone, society is solved. Honestly, should have known. And so, I was underwhelmed but largely unsurprised by Arcane's weak ending. I was a little surprised and entertained by the hoops it jumped through to attempt to make it work, but the frustration of a shitty ending was expected. It was the Dragon Prince's ending that really kind of broke my heart, despite being a kid's show with lots of poop jokes, and one inexplicable joke about semen. I had inadvertently given myself a lot more hope that this show would tackle the questions it asked, rather than awkwardly maneuvering its plot around to match conclusions they'd come to long before they wrote the ending. And it disappointed me. In many, many ways.
Oh my God. No!
Not only did this season hunker down on its bad politics that I felt sure it would inevitably critique, the season was just bad. There were numerous scenes where the actors sounded like they were being held at gunpoint.
What, is she not good enough for you? Sorry, what happened?
He'd been acting so strange, and he was arguing with my dad a lot.
I'm so sad and heartbroken for you.
There's straight-up stagnant concept art in the foreground of several shots, and the camera just keeps cutting to it for some reason. Environments don't look fully finished, like maybe the lighting wasn't rendered correctly. The show has never been a feast for the eyes or anything, but it was always competent. This season is also boring to the point of utter listlessness. They keep doing this thing where they jump back and forth between two bland and lethargic scenes of endless talking. The very first episode cuts back to a boring-ass expositional conversation between Erebos, Claudia, and Terry like 3 or 4 times, during which time the sun rises from dawn to mid-morning, which makes you feel like you've been sitting around watching these idiots talk for several hours. And the scene it's sharing airtime with is a depressing, empty, grieving scene where the humans sit around mourning the loss of Catullus for apparently several hours. The characters might care, but the audience doesn't, because we have no sense of the suffering. There are no bodies, no injured refugees, no blood or fire. This is the first episode of the final season. Why am I being encouraged to take a nap in the first 15 minutes? The tension of the season effectively doesn't begin until episode 5, at the end of which our heroes learn that Erebos has returned. He's not up to anything in particular, but he's returned. An episode later, he completes one of the lamest evil plans I've ever seen, put a pin in that, and then immediately gets his corporeal vessel murdered because he turns his back on an archer who he knows is there. And then he gets captured by a 13-year-old who just learned that he was free a few hours prior. Like, Erebos doesn't even run away. He's got giant, long, sexy legs that go on for days, and he just stands there while a bunch of humans shoot him in the face with firecrackers. And then they trip him because he has the stupidity to keep getting closer to the exploding projectiles that are attacking his face. God damn it. However, by far the worst decision this season makes is this.
The West wasn't barren at all. Before the Mage Wars, the land was the same as all of Zadia. The mages became warlords. Their armies scoured the lands for magic and bled it dry. The wars only stopped when there was nothing left to fight for. All the magical resources were consumed or destroyed.
Yikes. This is an even lazier equivalent of Arcane's little "the multiverse will prove that we were right all along" shtick. So, as I've discussed in my other Dragon Prince videos, this show did a good amount of subtextual work in its early seasons to portray humans as an oppressed minority. They're a diaspora population sent to a foreign land that we are led to believe is quite barren. Is it by divine providence that humans have no connection to magic? No, the story tells us, because Callum actually exceeds an assumed limit imposed upon him by those with the power of magic on their side. He learns 2 Arcanum, while most elf mages can only understand 1. Something was keeping humans from understanding magic, but it wasn't biology, clearly. The pain of humanity is something that was done to them, and they have to struggle with the assumed limits to overtake them. The human spirit is no less profound than the elf's spirit, but our depth is in our limits, and the struggle to surpass them. Maybe it was wrong of Harrow to kill the Magma Titan to save 100,000 people, but just by doing it and regretting it later, he struggles against a boundary and overtakes it, setting down a story that his sons will have to interpret in the light of their own struggles. I felt that this suffering was really well represented through dark magic. Dark magic isn't divine, it doesn't draw power from innate pure power sources. It comes with a cost. Much is made in the first season about the need to pay the blood price for its use, but that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't use it. It means you should know the cost. And yet, in this one moment, a human proves to another human that human beings are the vulgar, greedy, base creatures that the elves believe that they are. When Karim says this,
"Your beliefs came from fear. Mine come from knowledge. You humans are vermin, a plague. You take and will not be satisfied until our history and culture are dust in the desert wind."
He's just straight up correct. It turns out that humans, in their insolent whining to the stars for rage and pain at their innate unworthiness, cause mass self-destruction, grief, and pain because we have no sense of refinement, no connection to the sublime or the ethereal. Uncultivated savages that strip the land of all beauty and nourishment without thought. If I have any Native American viewers, I'd be curious about your thoughts on this. One might be tempted to think that the writers were doing a little colonizers destroying native habitats shtick in a European to Native American allegory, but to me, it feels like the closest parallel statement is an implication that the natives were using the land wrong. Tell me what you think. Some people really are born with a tether to the numinous, and some are merely beasts with a clever aptitude for language. And which side you're on is determined by blood. It's not that all humans can access magic with proper instruction and self-discovery. Apparently someone in his bloodline had the pleasure of being fucked by an elf. Or some other magical creature. Probably a bird. Let's return to our boy Erebos. During his "we're just the same, you and I" villain speech with Ezrin, he makes a comment that I actually really resonated with. Actually, that should be no surprise to you if you've seen my other Dragon Prince videos. Erebos is the main character of the Dragon Prince. I dare you to prove me wrong. He has this habit of offhandedly making really thought-provoking statements that no one else can keep up with. Like, there's this one line where he says, "This world was made by cruel, unfeeling hands." And I just wrote in my notes, I really like Erebos. Like, go off, that's true, and he should say it, and it should be addressed. But that's not the line I was talking about.
What you taught those people was dark magic. You didn't save them, you corrupted them.
You call it corruption. I call it compromise. It is the nature of children to think the world must be one way or another. With maturity, we learn that most of life is lived in the space between. I merely helped humanity mature so they could be free. Wasn't that worth some compromise?
They're really hunkering down on the use of the term compromise, where I don't really think it fits. To be honest, it feels like they're hoping the use of the word compromise puts a bad taste in our mouths. Like, we'll think of Neville Chamberlain or the DNC, but a far better term in this situation would be bargain or trade. We're not leaving behind ideas of good and bad to meet somewhere in the middle. Rather, we're giving away moral assuredness for the slim chance at grasping at something beyond. Harrow can be morally assured that sharing the weight of suffering with Durin is good, but maybe there is a good beyond assuredness that may require more risk. Moving forward is a risk. Without God's word to tell us what is right, we have to triumph over God.
I'm actually a magic man! Magic!
Magic means a lot of things in different situations, but what intrigues me is the creativity of magic. You can immediately see why most organized religions reject and oppress their witches or magic practitioners. They would like to believe that only gods can make new things. And as powerful as the witch hunters are, and as brutal as the subjugation of the witches can be, the witches always win. Because they convince the witch hunter that they can rival God with their creativity. The witch hunter wouldn't waste time on the hunt unless the idea of magic had some power over them. Magic is so seductive because it posits that creativity actually lies in you. And through an equitable exchange with the world around you, you can bend the environment to your design. Creativity isn't confined to the realm of the divine. Of course, magic naturally slots into knowledge over time. Witchcraft practices often slot neatly into actual medicine. Witches essentially take it upon themselves to learn, not from a book written by another person, but from the world itself. They take it upon themselves to discover, and that invites some risk. In the major arcana, I just lost so many of you, whatever. In the major arcana, the card Temperance is followed by the Devil. Temperance is a principle that guides you into a new thought process or environment. If you just got a new job, you're not going to immediately rock the boat. You'll be temperate, you won't take risks. You'll keep your nose to the grindstone and work until you understand the ropes. As you learn, gain mastery over a discipline, you gain the ability to manipulate your surroundings. The devil loves a bargain, that's their thing. That's why they can buy a soul for pennies on the dollar. They know how to strike a deal. Gaining mastery, becoming powerful through learning, is what makes magic as a concept feel egalitarian. A paradigm of gods ruling humans naturally engenders hierarchy. Gods rule people who speak to gods, who rule people who serve gods, who rule people who rebel against gods. Or seem to, by virtue of having a uterus in most cases. Magic equalizes things. Through the trials of learning and taking risks and suffering through the consequences, you gain a power so much richer than the banal power that rests with the godly. Victor from Arcane, while having a frustrating mess of a character arc, was also kind of intriguing because of this. Jace is a well-off kid who infinitely fails upwards until he accidentally finds himself ruling an entire city-state. In contrast, Victor is a marginalized person with about 1 million disadvantages holding him back, but he gains mastery over magic due to curiosity and an obsessive drive to learn more. He hurts himself. He literally pours his blood into his work. He allows himself to fuse with it, annihilating himself and becoming something else. He takes risks, and he ends up being the most powerful being in the world. A far more interesting ending to me would involve wrestling with the nature of magic from the inside, from a place of intimate understanding. Victor is in some kind of ethereal plane by the end of his evolution. He's well placed to learn what the arcane wants. The idea that the Arcane creates a kind of thoughtless stagnation, that it drives humanity toward a sterile form of perfection, is compelling on its own, but Victor's choice not to lean into this new, dreamless world isn't very interesting. It's obvious. Maybe there's a deal to be struck. Maybe the Arcane can be introduced into the human world, but only if humanity is willing to fight the urge toward perfection. Imagine a world where humans put themselves through intentional trials, allowed themselves to struggle, and accepted the changes as they came. Just rejecting magic doesn't embrace the challenge. It wipes their hands of the need to face the issue. What if the Arcane could only interact with technology if the inventor continuously made live sacrifices? Or the use of magic will always cause the user immense pain, even as it cures an illness. Maybe its mere existence in the human world shortens lives, but makes those lives a little less brutal and cruel. The range of possibilities widens. Pain and misery can be alleviated, but there is a greater risk that needs to be reckoned with every time. Don't just ignore the challenging thing. Face it and adapt. The world wasn't meant to stay exactly the same as it is right now. Forget about perfection, Victor. Magic is not the end of pursuit. It can be the pursuit itself, if approached mindfully. But Arcane did manage to make the loss feel great. In the end, while I think it was a rather boring way to explore magic, Victor has to give something up. There's a sacrifice. And that makes the ending of the show at least a bit more compelling than the end of The Dragon Prince. So, back to Erebos' grand plan to buck against the cosmic order in tribute to his daughter's memory. What he comes up with is to unleash the undead hordes of purgatory into the living world, after which he will have to black out the sun in order to keep the dead animated perpetually. Not only is this a really obvious reference to the season 1 finale of Avatar, a show which has been referenced quite enough in this series. B, just a very lamely executed plan in terms of the danger posed by the dead. And C, is immediately undercut by Erebos getting his ass handed to him after this event on 2 separate encounters, but also, this is upending the cosmic order? There's one moment during the big battle where Zubeia is in anguish over Avazandum's zombie form killing Rex Igneous, and Erebos looks to the sky, ostensibly where the arbiters of cosmic justice reside, and says,
Are you watching?
No, Erebos, I don't think they are. I think they would have checked in by now if they were watching. They have proven that violence doesn't matter to them. They have esoteric rules by which they officiate the justice of the universe. And they don't seem to regularly get involved in individual incidents unless they somehow upend the cosmic order. Bringing the dead to life does vaguely ring true as a story of upending the natural order. All that lives must die, and we have a visceral aversion for mixing life and death. That's why zombies are so creepy. They're supposed to be dead, but they still act by some urge that we can't understand. It also kinda fits with his sort of allegiance to humanity, like, death affects humans, so maybe bringing the dead to life is kind of a way of helping the humans fight the cosmic order. Maybe? But why? Erebos is the devil. He likes a bargain. He furthers the work of his daughter by giving humans the tools to overcome the limits imposed upon them from on high. He doesn't do things for them. He doesn't corrupt them. Humans aren't powerless idiots. They are responsible for their own actions. You can call Erebos a liar or a manipulator or whatever, but all he can do in the end is make an offer. Humans are not victims when they choose to accept it. They knowingly and intentionally take on the sacrifice. That's the fun part about Viren. He is a servant. His body gets a little bit sicker and a little bit grosser every time he uses dark magic, and he still makes the choice over and over again. The loss is worth it for him. I got a little off track here, so I'm gonna jump back in. So, Erebos is the devil. He's the fallen star. He tempts humanity to rebel against God. You get it. That's what gets him in trouble in the first place. He's not supposed to be making these deals. He's not supposed to help humanity mature. So, does bringing the dead to life do that? Not in the slightest. Even using the dead as an army of bodies is weak as shit. Erebos is at his most powerful, effective, and entertaining when he's giving his enemies the rope to hang themselves with. He destroys Catullus from inside his prison just by giving Kareem the means to give Sol Regum the means to do the things that he would do already if given the opportunity. Very well played, Erebos. Your enemies are weakened now. Would have been even weaker if you'd managed to attack Catullus when the king was not on the other side of the continent, but you have to imagine that Ezran's forces have been devastated by this. Sounds like a good time to take advantage and make an offer that will actually be difficult to refuse. But remember, the idea is to make the Star Touch elves hurt. So again, what offer can you make to humanity that is difficult to turn down and will hurt the keepers of cosmic justice? Humanity wants to be pure of its need for dark magic. At least the humans relevant to the finale do. It's strange to me that Callum, so notable for being a human with access to primal magic, is only able to end the fight through use of dark magic. What if this connection to the primal sources could be taught to humans, the way Callum taught it to himself? Erebos would love to give the gift of the Arcana to humanity, but it simply can't be done with the cosmic judges policing the use of primal magic, and magic in general. If Erebos could give humanity the tools to fight the star-touched elves, he would purify them of dark magic forever. Who would want to use shitty dark magic when primal magic doesn't make you sick? Of course, if humanity doesn't make the choice to help, Callum will have to be prepared to die, which could have further complications down the line if Erebos finds his way out of prison again. Is it the best possible resolution? Probably not. I came up with it in a few minutes, and I'm just one guy. But it's in character for Erebos, it addresses his actual goal, which is hurting the Star Touch elves who killed his daughter, and it forces Callum to make a choice that is bigger than just a hero being willing to sacrifice their own life. Heroes do that shit all the time. Real sacrifice would be putting the purity of all humanity on the line. Is he really willing to subject humanity to an existence that breeds the conditions for dark magic? Is learning the Arcana worth taking up arms against the gods of this world? If it's not, is he really willing to make that decision on behalf of all of humanity? Either way, he makes a sacrifice, and Erebos does his thing by tempting a human. Erebos can make whatever offer he wants. It will always be up to humans to accept the offer. So, don't let him predict your actions. Make a choice that will actually take him off guard because it's a genuine sacrifice. This show was so deliberate with its approach to magic as a risk, as a kind of knowledge, as a test. Callum has to do dark magic to acquire his primal source Arcana. Both times he learns a new kind of primal magic, it comes off the heels of doing dark magic to save the people he loves, sacrificing a bit of himself to achieve something. By contrast, Claudia regularly fails to sacrifice her family, and dark magic just keeps beating down on her as a result, taking her leg and her sanity and her entire sense of self. This show made all these keen observations about sacrifice and suffering and pain and self-discipline and discovery that Arcane couldn't even figure out how to discuss with any kind of fluency. But Arcane got one fundamental thing right. There's got to be a sacrifice. What the Dragon Prince decides to leave you off with is that the heroes of our story were saved from having to corrupt themselves by the sacrifices of the archdragons. This is explicitly stated. I mean, how could it not be? The finale feels watery and boring for a reason. We didn't feel the presence of any tension, and we know that the heroes haven't had to sacrifice anything. Erebos teaches them nothing. At the very least, if these characters were willing to make sacrifices, if Ezran was willing to commit murder, and Callum was willing to die, and Rayla was willing to kill Callum, at least make someone make the damn sacrifice. Following the oven incident, Rabbi Eleazar ben Horkinus was ostracized from the Sanhedrin. His student, Rabbi Akiva, came to him and euphemistically said, "My teacher, it appears to me that your colleagues are distancing themselves from you." Since Rabbi Akiva was so conscientious, Eleazar was more or less chill about it, sitting on the floor, tearing his clothes, and removing his shoes, signifying that he accepted the ostracization. Rabbi Eleazar may have had a nearly prophetic knowledge of the Torah and God's will, But what he didn't understand was that the nature of humans' relationship to the sublime is supposed to change. It is in our nature to always be becoming something else. If I reference Nietzsche in one more video, I'm gonna spontaneously sprout a neckbeard. That could be kinda cute. He didn't know how to think his own thoughts, an individualist though he was. He couldn't fathom having to cite a textual source, or having to explain his reasoning and logic. He just knew. It's like his mind was somehow one with God's, and so he should have been able to control everyone else's thoughts with just the sheer authority of that. He couldn't sacrifice God for the advancement of his fellow humans, who needed to begin making their own determinations. In the end, a sacrifice is made for him, and he passively acquiesces to the will of his colleagues, and he learns nothing. I don't know much about Eleazar. I hope he had a pleasant life in a secluded cabin in the mountains where he had tea with God every day. I hope that made him very happy. But most of us can't live like that. What really gets me down about the ending of Arcane and the Dragon Prince is just how resigned they feel. In my series on Arcane, I've returned a lot to the idea of hubris, which is a recurring theme in the show. I've argued that calling the pursuit of progress hubris is a lazy way of absolving oneself of their choices. The pursuit itself isn't bad. If you harmed another person, you have to confront what you did. My Dragon Prince series has focused on the responsibilities of love. When you love someone, you have to treat the people you don't love with particular care. You can't allow your bias for one person to turn into violence against other people, because that kind of violence will fractal outwards infinitely. Arcane has concluded its argument with a statement that some kinds of pursuit are just innately bad, regardless of how humans handle that pursuit. The Dragon Prince pins the responsibility for violence onto some guy whose own relationship to the violence that emerges from love is apparently not worth commenting on in any meaningful way. It's just this fatalistic admission that they weren't prepared to have the conversations they started, and they aren't willing to take a risk and challenge their own beliefs now. No one has reckoned with their own flaws and sacrificed an old way of being for a new one. No one wants to cut the umbilical cord with God and deal with being in a world where they create themselves and sculpt their environments. No one wants to kick Eleazar out of the study hall so he can live out his hermetic life blissed out on divinity. No one moved forward, and no one changed. I am closing in on 500 subscribers, which some of you may know from a previous video was my goal for last year, so that feels really good. Thank you. If you'd like to help me get to that level a little bit sooner, you know what to do. Engage, send, share, comment, send me some money on Buy Me a Coffee if you would like to, only if you have enough money to do that. I'm probably gonna spend it on calzone, so don't consider it that important. Bye. This video is brought to you by me. You're welcome. I think about stories a lot. Almost constantly. I'm not sure where I am right now. Point is, if you're writing a story and you need some help, you can hire me. I consult on screenplays, write serialized fiction, and yes, I write scripts for YouTube professionally. That's right, you're looking at a pro. Don't check my sub count. You can go to my website to check out my portfolio, read my reviews, look at my prices, and reach out for a chat about how I can help with your project.